Welcome to the podcast, Chris Graham, Rod Mullins, Monday after NASCAR, after a thrilling race, the All-Star race last night. Well, I say thrilling. Normally the story would be a guy dominating. Joey Logano led 199 of the 200 laps. The soft tires didn't help with the new pavement to allow for a lot of passing, so
Mhm.
he got the clean air and stayed out in front most of the way. But that's not the story of the race. Something else happened. Actually, what happened was on lap one, and then what happened on lap one played a role in the fun stuff afterwards. Rod, there's a lot to break down here. Take us into it.
Okay. My first reaction to the race,
Yeah,
it was boring.
yeah.
It was not a thrilling all-star race. But I think what happened with that lap one, as you're talking about, and the struggle for dominance, so to speak, as going around there on that short track. Wow. First of all, you know, clear to see the replay that Kyle Busch got forced into the wall essentially because they were going three wide through there, and Kyle Busch just really didn't have any other place to go, so he hits the wall. But then he comes back, and then he says he didn't touch him. I don't see how that happens when the video shows him pushing Stenhouse on around and then he's flipping around. Stenhouse goes to the pits after that. He parks his car in Kyle Busch's pit stall there on the pit row, and then says, "I'm going to wait for him. I'm going to wait for him until after this race is finished." And then when the race was finished, oh, it was on. And as the saying goes, it was on like Donkey Kong, pretty much is what happened.
Yeah, and to say for Kyle Busch to try to say he didn't do anything, watching it live even, and then of course watching the replays right after it happened, it was like an aggressive driver on the interstate. I mean, it
Yeah.
was as soon as he, got bumped a little bit, whatever happened there, and he's hit, raised the wall. He came after him like a guy, who was on a vengeance from God kind of thing. And so, and there was that. I even remember telling my wife when I was watching that, man, watch out for this. I mean, maybe a couple hours will calm the guy down, but
No.
if I'm getting run off the road like that, I'm probably hanging around a little bit and seeing what happens here. I was surprised, even though I said that, I was still surprised to see that, not only the drivers themselves, but then the two crews got into it. That was one of the better NASCAR fights I've seen in a while.
Yeah, it was. It was one of the better NASCAR fights. I think probably, leading up to that first punch, there was a lot of talking right there. But Ricky Stenhouse comes across with that right, and smacks it pretty much. You see some of the best pictures I've seen. Stills. These were cell phone stills. A lot of people were recording, and then you had, of course, Fox. I think it was in the pits too. But some of the best pictures include Kyle Busch with a water bottle, clenching it, squeezed up as he's hit. And then he goes over and goes in one direction after that hit. They all start piling in. Somewhere in that melee, Ricky Stenhouse Sr. gets a hold of Kyle Busch. There is just, it's all over the place. Ricky Stenhouse gets flipped over some tires. You start hearing him yelling, "Dad, Dad," out loud and stuff, calling for his dad. And then, as all of this is going on, there are pit crews fighting on the little ramp going up to the trailer, going into the trailer. Kyle Busch manages to get himself up there. He's in a headlock from a couple of the Kroger pit crew teams. And I don't know if Stenhouse's dad was in on that. It's hard to tell with everything going on. And then here comes some of, Kyle Busch's pit crew, and they're throwing people off of and, I think probably the best line that came out of this was, um, Kyle said an F you to him, essentially and stuff. And he says, he said, "Hey," he said, "I suck just as bad as you do." He admitted that. He told him, he said, to Stenhouse, he said, "I suck as bad as you do." But I think the thing was, Stenhouse feels this isn't over. And Stenhouse said, "I'm going to wreck you at Charlotte." And sure enough, that's that threat. I think he'll come through on. It'll be Kyle Busch racing with looking in that rear view mirror the entire race to find out where Stenhouse is at. If he is running ahead, if he's running ahead, then you can just about assume Stenhouse will take him out. Now, if they get caught in the back in some kind of melee or something that's happened and neither one of them, their cars are any good, I don't know if we'll see anything. We may see some bumping and so forth, but I don't know if we'll see anything as aggressive as what we saw on the track last night at the All-Star race.
I'm reading now that the Stenhouse and Bush both could be facing suspension, certainly
Yep.
fines. I mean, Stenhouse for the fight, probably for the threat that I'm going to wreck you in Charlotte. That probably gets you in a little bit of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But then Bush also, if NASCAR determines he intentionally wrecked Stenhouse, it's just you don't see dads get involved very often,
Right.
which is interesting to see there too. Um, but yeah, this is something to watch for the rest of the season. Just another little bit. Even Denny Hamlin, I mean, Denny Hamlin being who Denny Hamlin is, he was being
Yep.
interviewed after the race, and I saw him say, "Hey, at least there was something exciting to talk about afterwards."
Yeah, we had an exciting fight, on our hands here tonight and so forth. Here I've got one question though. I can see where Stenhouse is going to get, and like you said, Stenhouse is going to get suspended, the possibility of it. And then Kyle Busch, of course, from the aggressive driving out on the track. Um, but again, we're back to something we've talked about many years while we've had this podcast, and I've been on with you on this podcast. What is enough and what is enough when we say it's every guy, it's every racer for himself? Hey, have at it, boys. Let's, there's that rule. And, I like the idea of Stenhouse, standing up, coming in and standing up for himself like he did, because a lot of these drivers won't do it. A lot of these drivers just won't take the time to go and it's either image or something like that, or I'm going up against Kyle Busch and I don't want to be thought of, this way and so forth. But I know a couple of people had put on Facebook last night, I've got a new favorite driver, and I did have a favorite driver before, but man, Ricky Stenhouse is even better in my book. And this has kind of brought back this, the same sort of thing that Kyle Busch was known for as, public enemy number one at one time. And, I think in some ways, Denny Hamlin's kind of wrestled that away from him to some degree with some of the fans. But, I don't know. NASCAR needs to be less vague about this. And if they're going to go and give a penalty, and I say this, if they're going to suspend Stenhouse, they need to suspend Busch. I don't think it should be one or the other. I think both of them need to go. Um, One race, I don't know how many $1,000 fine that they'll get hit with it. But both of them need to be suspended a race out of it. And as far as I'm concerned, too, I think possibility of losing some points. If they lost some points out of it, of course, not being at the race will cause them to lose some points. But, NASCAR is going to have to draw that line. I mean, we're going to have to see how serious NASCAR is about have at it, boys, and not talk it and then just say, okay, if you're going to go this far with it, yeah, we'll suspend you is what we'll do. But if not, oh, have at it, have a fight or two, and one way or the other.
Yeah, and I admire Stenhouse too. Hadn't really thought of him much as a racer, as a driver before this, but I'm like some of those fans you saw on Facebook last night.
Mhm.
Like a guy standing up for himself. That said, don't go out there and say in front of cameras, and you're in front of cameras. I mean, whether you
Yeah,
actually are or not, don't say you're going to wreck him next week in Charlotte.
no. Mm-mm.
Don't let cameras pick you up saying that, because I mean, not to say don't go out there and maybe aggressively drive back, and bump him one time or something. Don't necessarily say don't try to wreck him. But man, you get caught saying that, now you can't go do it.
Well, it's sort of like that thing about, it used to, unless you really did it and you didn't say anything about it, of committing murder. Just don't go out and tell everybody you're going to go and commit murder is what you're going to do. And that's essentially what he did. He went out and told everybody. I think I would have been a lot more secretive about it and say, okay, we're finished here. We'll take care of things out on the track next week. That's all he'd had to say. If he had left it at that, I think it'd been okay. But NASCAR's got to suppress that threat that took place. And that was a premeditated threat all the way across the board. And Ricky Stenhouse, I'm sure, is going to learn one way or the other out of it. He shouldn't have said it, but you're in the heat of the moment. You're in one of these situations of where you're standing up to, NASCAR champion, and you're trying to exert some, at least some force with it. Yeah, I'm going to do what I've got to do, but I think I would have picked my words a little bit more wisely than what he did.
Like a baseball team who has a star slugger get hit by a pitch. You don't
Hmm.
ever hear them come out and say, "We're going to hit their star slugger tomorrow night." They just do it.
Yeah.
Um, and then things kind of get resolved. Hey, it's kind of like they call it in pro wrestling receipts. Hey, if
Hmm.
if you in pro wrestling, which is staged combat, if you really punch a guy, he punches you back, and then you're even.
Yep.
Um, but now that Stenhouse has said, I'm going to wreck you at Charlotte, he can't wreck him at Charlotte or anywhere. And he can't even bump him. He can't even accidentally race him hard. Kind of like again in baseball.
Right.
If on Sunday, after a guy gets hit on Friday or Saturday, if on Sunday a pitcher for the other team hits somebody, whether or not it's intentional as far as the league's concerned. So yeah, that's a little tough there. Well, we talked about, so I mentioned quickly Logano. The race itself
Hmm.
wasn't much of a race. 199 laps led up 200.
Right.
The other big news of the day was Kyle Larson,
Yep.
and not just what he did at the All Star race, but what he did earlier in the day. He then flew to the All Star race. Actually, had a pretty good run there too. But he's setting himself up for an interesting weekend next weekend.
I don't know what they'll do if he wins at Indy. If he were to win at Indy, that's going to be very tight on him getting back to Charlotte with all the stuff that he has to take care of. But yeah, he had a great I know they were really worried whether or not he was going to take advantage of those 4 laps that he needed to do for the qualifying run. And he went out and practiced some, had ran a couple of laps, but I watched him in one of those sessions where he was turning the laps, and my gosh, I mean, 222, 223 miles an hour. He was still kind of going easy on it at that point. What was it? Top speed was somewhere in the neighborhood 232, somewhere in that
Saw
neighborhood, I
that,
think
yeah,
is what it was.
yeah.
And so, he has gone up there, and I know some of the drivers, there's been a couple of drivers that have kind of said, he kind of needs to stick with what he does best, and that's NASCAR. He's going to go and he's going to whip this car out and think it's a stock car and he's going to hit somebody. And then if he does, he's going to take out 2 or 3 cars during the course of the race. Well, that may very well happen, but I don't discredit Kyle Larson's ability to be able to drive a race car on any given racetrack, because when he proved and he qualified for the Indianapolis 500, he proved beyond the shadow of a doubt this kid's good. I mean, that's just all there is to it. He can drive dirt, he can drive on pavement. Yeah, here he is. Now he's at Indy and he's driving one of those cars. Just unreal what he was doing. And they ended up holding the race up last night about 30 minutes because to give him enough time to be able to fly in. I saw the helicopter take off at Indianapolis there, video of it taking off from the golf course that they have there in the inside part of the track. And then he takes off, and then helicopter shows up, coming in, lands, and then he's out of the car cheering fans. I mean, the fans were going crazy when he came into the racetrack last night. And so they did hold it up, I think about 30 minutes, maybe in order to get him kind of settled in. But, going back to this thing about Joey Logano, though, winning this race, Joey Logano and his team needed it. And you can say one thing, it's been a Penske weekend so far, because Penske's got 3 cars, there, the front row, there at Indianapolis, with Newgarden in there, I think at third place, I think is what he's going to be rolling off third. And then you've got Will Power, who's going to be first. Then you have Ryan Blaney and then Joey Logano finishing up like they did last night. And Logano, especially, and a lot of this was attributed to tire tests that they had done. And they have done, they'd worked with 3 sets of tires. One was a red tire, one was a white lettered tire, and the other was a yellow labeled tire. And the softer tire is what they started out with last night, but they managed to get more out of that car than I've seen here in the last few weeks of races. And it definitely showed. So who knows what we'll see this coming weekend at Indianapolis and at Charlotte. It could be a Penske dominated weekend. Who knows how it goes?
Yeah, I read something about Logano where he said, as far as North Wilkesboro is concerned, his team had him testing there and running lap after lap after lap. I think he said
Mhm.
he did around 800 laps there in testing, and it was almost like, he said it was reminiscent of the U.S. hockey, the movie about the U.S. hockey team
Mhm.
where the coach there had his guys doing those suicide drills, as they call them in sports, where you go
Right.
up and down the ice until you're exhausted. And he attributes, I mean, a lot of his good run yesterday to that. Um, so now I mean, I can't believe we're talking about Memorial Day weekend.
Mhm.
And normally, of course, with this podcast, we focus on NASCAR, but with Larson trying the double, um, what are your thoughts, Rod? I mean, you keep up with this. What do you think? What are his chances this weekend? Both with the early race, the Indy 500, then the Coca-Cola 600 Sunday night.
If he has some good luck, I don't see him winning. Let's just put it that way. I think there's too many veterans that are, cagey, wily veterans that they have in IndyCar that's going to be out there in front. Newgarden's one of those. I think Newgarden's looking for a repeat performance as to what he did last year. But you like I said, you've got those three Penske cars on the front row, or at least dominating the first two rows right there, and then you've got Newgarden coming in third. It's anybody's race coming up. It's with this one, it's hard to kind of predict, but you're kind of saying, hey, let's see if Willpower can do this. Let's see if Newgarden can make it two in a row, back to back years. I just don't see Kyle Larson as being able to pull off a win. If he did, it would be incredible. It would be just one of the highlights, of course, of his racing career. Don't know if he'd get to Charlotte on time. Like I said earlier, don't know if he'd make it to Charlotte on time with all the sponsorship things and all the stuff you have to do for IndyCar. But I'm sure they get him on there, and then we'd have to find out who's going to drive the car, because Kevin Harvick is slated to be up in the booth and everything on Sunday night. So does that mean Kevin Harvick has to go to the car and drive the car for the first part of the race and then climb out and go get cleaned up after the time that Larson gets back to Charlotte? Who knows? How will he do at Charlotte? He can do really well if he's rested up. That's going to be the thing. My bet is that they'll probably put him on the helicopter, and they'll get him there, and they'll probably be pumping him full of IV before he even gets to Charlotte, and making sure that he is up to strength. They may even, for some reason, give him a couple of vitamin shots. Who knows? Something that's going to help him a little bit as he gets back, because that race at Indianapolis takes a lot out of you. I don't care what they say. We're talking a 2.5 mile course, but it's different. There's just a whole lot of things different about it as opposed to a NASCAR stock car. Of course, you're sitting in there all scrunched up, is the way you are when you get in that Indy car. You've got a little bit of room to move, but you still have that cushioned seat. He's gonna have a rough go of it, I think, and I don't mean in a bad way that he's going to wreck. He just better hope that his body is up for it. I mean, if he the least little thing, it could mess him up on one or the other this coming weekend. Where he finishes, he could finish like a Tony Stewart that year. Tony Stewart went up there, drove the 500, finished sixth, I believe what it was. Then he went to Charlotte and finished fourth. Now that was a great accomplishment in and of itself for Tony Stewart, but we've not seen that. We've not seen that before. We've not seen that in a long time, especially after Tony Stewart has stepped away from NASCAR. So it might be Kyle Larson's chance to shine this coming weekend. Who knows? I mean, it could surprise both of us.
I want you to help put in perspective for our listeners out there, viewers out there on YouTube. This isn't just, I mean, okay, there's 500 miles in Indy and 600 miles in the Coca-Cola 600. So there's
Mhm.
1,100 miles of driving in a day plus flying from one to the other.
Mhm.
That's hard. I mean, but it's not just even that. You're running two different styles of cars, two
Mhm.
very different racetracks against guys who, I mean, he's now Larson's an experienced NASCAR driver. The first race he's racing, though, in the Indy race, he's going up against a whole crew of guys who that's what they do. They race Indy cars.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, there's so much. This isn't just, getting in a car, the same kind of car against the same field, twice in a day. This is,
Right.
oh my God, I can't even think of an equivalent in any other sport what this is.
Well, he's going to go from a car that is virtually controlled from the pits almost. Everything is controlled, computer controlled. His steering wheel is going to be your steering wheel in a NASCAR stock car is like a standard steering wheel, so to speak. I mean, it looks that way. It's got a little bit, got some differences with it. But in an Indy car, it looks like something you'd see out of a video game or something. It's kind of square. You kind of drive it this way and stuff. And then you see your acceleration come across, or your gas when you're giving the fuel and stuff. You'll see that when it picks up. You see a thing that tells you about braking and so forth. You've got to get used to that. And then you're shifting. Some of the stuff is still down on the floor, but it's cramped quarters. I mean, that's a cramped up car, is what it is. It's, and then you go to a NASCAR stock car. They've, came into at least a little bit of the 21st century with this new next generation car, but there's some differences with it. I mean, you still got to go and depend on, if it's shifting, whatever you've got to do. Sometimes it shifts itself. It's got that automatic part of it, but then the driver can shift also to kind of keep that car going, or at least rev to so many RPMs is what they need. It's going to be tough. I don't think he's going to have any problem adjusting or adapting to the gearing or anything. I think once he gets used to it, he's going to know really well. And I think that proved it last night, getting off the helicopter after qualifying, then getting off the helicopter and going in and finishing the way he did last night. Finished fourth, if I'm not mistaken. Finished fourth, I think, in the All-Star race. But wow, he's just we're going to see what kind of driver he is. He could be above and beyond what we have seen of some of these drivers that have come through trying to make the double double, on that day and trying to do this.
So one last bit of racing news, and it actually involves our co-host here for the day, Rod Mullins, who is going to be behind the wheel of a drag race car, hopefully a few times for
Hopefully
Team AFP. Was it Wednesday, Rod, that you're doing this?
Wednesdays
Tell,
when it's
tell us,
scheduled.
tell
Mhm.
our listeners about this. What's going on?
Well, as of right now, I'm scheduled for Wednesday at Bristol Motor Speedway, really at Thunder Valley, Bristol Dragway, and we will have a media challenge. I participated in this probably several years ago, kind of a 3 or 4 year kind of span that I didn't participate because they kind of gave it to some other people, kind of went around. And I got the email here probably about a month or so ago, a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and they asked, would I be ready to go with the media challenge? And I told them, yeah, I'll be ready to go. So we'll see what happens. I'm just hoping we get at least a Camaro or a Dodge Challenger or something on the track. One year they put us out there in Impalas, and that wasn't my idea of drag racing in those kind of cars, because that just didn't have the old humph, so to speak. When I was behind the wheel of the Camaros couple of times. Oh wow! Now you talk about some speed. They had some speed, and then I think I had one of my students ask me the other day, "How fast are you going?" I said, "Probably somewhere in the neighborhood about 115, 120 miles an hour." And then by the time I get to the scoring stand or the scoreboard right there, I've got to start making plans to start braking or slowing down, and that is let off the gas and barely tap your brakes, just enough to start slowing down. Otherwise, if you keep on going, you're going to hit a big sand trap down at the end of the track. So I'm getting prepared for it. Just got to be ready off the edge when that thing goes from in between yellow to green. That's when I've got to be ready to go, and I've got to be closely paying attention to that Christmas tree down there at Thunder Valley.
Don't red light, right?
Oh yeah, don't red light. No.
Don't red light. So it's a quarter of a mile track. How many seconds does it take you to get down there?
Oh gosh, I think I was somewhere in the neighborhood of something like probably six, somewhere around in there. I'm guessing at this, maybe about 5 or 6 seconds, 6 seconds, something in that neighborhood, 6 or 7
Wow.
seconds.
So because
So
you're
it's
getting
like you've got to
110,
floor it.
115 at the end of it there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Goodness gracious, man. That is
So but you're not getting the speed like some of these other ones that tip at 300 miles an hour or close to 300 miles an hour, but the sensation is there. You have to strap in, you have to be ready, and boy, I tell you, you feel the G-force too. Even when you put that foot down on the gas and take off, you feel it, and it throws you up against the car, the seat, and everything. So, I'm going to be up against some tough people. There's some of these media guys. You look at them, and the first thing you might say is, what do they know about this stuff? They've got one guy who's a photographer. Actually, now I think he's moved away from being a photographer for just one newspaper. And now he is kind of like for all of these different newspapers, kind of like a freelancer, probably more than anything else. He dominated there for like 2 or 3 years that I went. And I mean, I would look at him and say, there's no way possible. But some of these guys enjoyed driving hot rods when they were younger, and that's where the advantage is at. Some of these guys know how to pop some hot rods. If I had popped a hot rod like that, oh God, I would have been beaten to death. You'd had to report me to about social services. My dad would have killed me out of something like that to do that with a car, unless I was on a track, with a car made for that. But whew, I tell you, some of these guys know how to do it. Some of these guys know how to do it. Hopefully, I can get a little bit of experience and maybe even make it into midway like I did the first year. I made it about midway through the round the last time. I'd like to get to the final round this time around, but I've got some tough competition.
I grew up in a racing culture. My uncle was a very successful drag racer here locally in Waynesboro, and he would drive around sometimes to other places. One of my first cousins, also pretty successful drag racer over the years. I hate, I can now admit, because my parents, unfortunately, have both passed, so they can't get. I can't. I'm not going to get in trouble anymore. I have been in cars going that fast. Probably,
Mm,
certainly shouldn't have been on back roads
right.
and et cetera, et cetera. I have been in a, I have been in a '69 red Camaro with white racing stripes going 130 miles an hour on a back road. Um, my cousin
Mm,
won that race, but when you're riding around with a guy in his hot rod and somebody challenges him to a drag race, it's not like you're going to stand on the side of the road and let them go. You kind of, because they might just keep on driving. So it's one of those things. Yeah, like you said, though, you would have gotten in trouble, Rod. The statute of limitations run out on me now, so I'm not gonna
yep.
get in trouble anymore. But I know what it feels like. I'm not with my foot on the pedal, but I know what it feels like to go that fast. And yeah, it will knock you back a little bit. It definitely will.
Actually, I did get in trouble. I did get grounded from the car for probably about 2 or 3 weeks as I was topping the hill in Clintwood near the bank building. I was flooring it, and almost like something out of Dukes of Hazzard is the way my car felt. It was kind of like airborne. And lo and behold, at the right turn was none other than my uncle, my mom's baby brother. And by the time I had already got back home, baby brother, uncle, who also was called several expletives by me after this was all said and done, he had already called home and told on me. And then, buddy, I was down. I was down for the count at that point, and I was just like, he and I did not speak for time being after that. And I kind of told him, he's gone now and stuff. He passed away probably about 3 or 4 years after that. But man alive, I told him I had some choice words for him at that point. And he laughed at me about it. And I told him, I said, hey, don't you ever do that again to me. Don't ever do that again. He told me, he said, I'll do it as long as I'm drawing breath in me, buddy. If you're doing something wrong, I'm gonna keep you out of trouble the best way I can. So
Yeah, well,
oh
that's
yeah.
growing up in a small town, if you're gonna leave the ground as you go over a hill, you're likely gonna find somebody you know on
Yep,
the other
you
end of
are.
that. Well, gosh, Rod, that's fun. So good luck on
Okay.
Wednesday. Well, of course, for our readers out there, we'll keep you apprised. We'll let you know how Rod does if he brings home the trophy like we expect him to. Given
Well,
the fact that he's got the Dukes of Hazzard in him. We'll let you
I
know
just
about that too. But
I just need my Waylon Jennings tape to kind of go along with me. Waylon Jennings tape, just a good old boys, I think, going in the background. I can't listen to that. That's just too much for me. That brings back too many memories of the 80s, and I'm just not prepared for that right now at this point.
I had a Dukes of Hazzard lunchbox every Friday at school in elementary school years. Was hey man, tonight the Dukes of Hazzard's on. So
Wow.
that got you ready anyway. So no, uh, play you some Whalen. Get out there and put your foot to the floor, and let's just see what happens. But so good luck. And for now, Rod, though, thanks of course for your time and your insight.
I appreciate it, Chris. Thanks.